Welcome to tomorrow's Tech Today, bringing you the latest in technology, talent, and transformational change. With me, your host, Professor Sally Eaves. Hi everyone, we're live now from AWS Summit London, and I'm in great company with Helen O'Neill. Helen, great to join you here today.
Great to meet you.
Fantastic. And I'd love to kind of dive right in and set the scene of what you're doing at Hertility. I think it's an amazing, amazing organisation. Your mission has affected so many of us, particularly females and reproductive health. Can you share a bit more about your why you founded Hertility and what you're all about and what you're doing?
Absolutely. It's a big question, but it's a big mission. And we started with a much more basic question, and that was, can I find answers about my body? Absolutely. And this was very much a personal and a professional question that I had. Indeed. I spent the last 16 years in reproductive medicine, and it's a bit of a strange irony when you have a master's, a PhD, and you're lecturing masters and medical students. Indeed. And don't have any answers about your own body when it comes to your fertility or reproductive health, despite educating people all about the underlying determinants of our reproductive health. So we started with that basic question, can I find out more about my body? And it's really grown into something that provides more than just answers, but support. Absolutely. Because not many people need just a blood result. Most people need that to be interpreted for them. And they definitely need the what's next. So we've really built a comprehensive health assessment that enables us to give somebody a blood test, and following on from that, the interpretation of their health assessment answers with their blood test, and then the what's next. So we provide telemedicine, clinical services, scanning, really to try and be the home of women's health.
Love that, absolutely. You're absolutely right. It affects so many people. I think it's about 31% of women have had a reproductive challenge at some point in our lives. It does affect pretty much every single one of us at some point, or someone we know or care about.
And 100% of women will go through hormonal changes, and they're anticipated hormonal changes that do have an impact on our lives.
Exactly.
And we're 52% of the planet, so it's
very, very important, definitely. And what you said there as well really struck home about the support. And the relationship that helps you guide through that data as well, because I think that's really important. And there was some research I was looking at from AWS that was looking at kind of why people don't go for help. And it wasn't so much cost that came out as number one, it was fear. And about where to go to for that support and making it more accessible. So what I love about what you're doing at Hertility as well is the fact you're making this kind of democratized, available in the privacy and safety of your own home. And it's the most sensitive data we have, isn't it? Our health data. It's our DNA and really sensitive topic areas too. So to be able to look at this in your own home, but have that trusted support afterwards to do that interpretation, I think is key. And could you share a little bit more about some of the diagnostic tests as well? Because I know it goes beyond fertility to things like menopause as well and other areas. So if we could share a bit about that, that'd be great too.
So you really can't separate out the prevalence of reproductive health conditions with that general individual question of, can I learn more about my body? Can I learn about my fertility, my reproductive health? Because of the sheer prevalence of reproductive conditions, endometriosis affects 1 in 10, polycystic ovary syndrome affects 1 in 10, it's 1 in 4 in India. There are so many of the, even thyroid conditions. We know that thyroid and hormone imbalance that affects your thyroid is one of the number one problems globally. So the number one prescribed drug in the world is thyroxine. So that gives you an indication of the sheer prevalence of hormone imbalance and then reproductive conditions that are affected by our hormones. And then the different conditions that affect, I guess, our uterine anatomy. So building all of those data points into our health assessment was really fundamental to answering some of the most basic questions. And so when we wanted to start this, we really wanted to ensure that every single one of those those really common conditions could be potentially diagnosed. Fantastic. So in order to do that, we looked at a very complex, essentially our reproductive health is very complex. So we had to take into account the current baseline diagnostic criteria and guidelines for as many conditions as possible, and then embed that within our health assessment. And so that really, from the first instance, gives us an opportunity to assess every individual based on their unique data points, their menstrual patterns, their symptoms, their biometrics, to say, okay, we've suspected a diagnosis in this individual. Now let's test appropriately to that suspected diagnosis, so that we're not testing anything that we don't need to test, but that we are testing things in order to answer certain questions, so that we're closing that predictive diagnostic loop for that individual, which helps us to then reaffirm any predictions, but also re-question some of the diagnostic criteria that already exists, which from our database really doesn't seem to serve women in the way that it should be doing. So our goal is to really rewrite some of the diagnostic criteria and guidelines to get women to help much sooner than they currently are.
I love that. I think two really important things you mentioned there is personalised medicine.
Yes.
In many ways, that's where we're going, and it's really understanding you and growing with you, but also that the ability to revisit what we thought we knew about healthcare. Yeah. We see it in so many sectors. We get more and more information. We get more and more granular. Sometimes we have to reimagine and revisit what we thought we knew, and unlearn that and adapt.
A lot of
oh my goodness, yes, and how the different interactions with different types of conditions affect things too. So more and more associations, that ability to get granular and personalised, but to do that in a place where you are, where you feel safe and where you can do that, I think is absolutely key. So love all of the above. And another thing, it was mentioned in the keynote we've just been at, obviously for the launch of the summit today, about support for people, not just in terms of access to data and interpreting it, but also starting a business in the first place. And that particularly affects certain groups. So Women in Tech is one example of that, and female founders. One of the stats that came up this morning was really kind of drawing into that, the fact that kind of not enough investment and not the same level of investment, should we say, compared to, say, other demographics. So I'd love to talk about that, because you're a great ambassador and visible role model of exactly this particular space. And it'd be great to kind of share your kind of journey around that and what's helped you along the way. So, because I think we've all experienced it. There's those moments, isn't there, where you have to push on and there's a challenge and it's tricky, but you get support, and that could be training and education. It could be a mentor or a sponsor. It can just be yourself and your own resilience to push through. So perhaps you could share a little bit more about that as well, because again, I think that could be really inspirational for people experiencing that right now to kind of go again, if they have that challenge.
Absolutely. I think in terms of the additional support that's needed, for me, it was the latter that was most important, and that was internal strength and resilience.
Exactly.
And true belief in the knowledge that we had, the mission that we needed to solve, and our qualifications to do so.
Exactly.
We know fundamentally what needs to be done, not necessarily because we have a background in the research side of things, in the education side of things. Yes, most of our team have masters and PhDs. That was almost it wasn't a prerequisite.
Understood.
But at the same time, that's the type of caliber of individual who really wants to solve individual problems across women's health.
Exactly.
And so the clarity, the vision that we've had to say, these are the problems and these are the very clear solutions that are needed to deliver an effective worldwide solution. But underlying all of that, I think we're a 98% female team, and that makes us even more professional in the problem we're solving, because from a first person standpoint, I mentioned at the start, this was a professional endeavor for me as much as a personal one, because from a personal standpoint, when you have all of the fundamental knowledge about something and you can't apply it to make change, that is very frustrating. So
indeed.
To me, it was about having the drive and the conviction to really drive this forward and say, we are looking at the most obvious problem that nobody is solving, and we know what we need to do to solve it. The only thing we need, when people offer mentorship or any of these things, I'm like, I just need money. I know how to do this. And that comes to, I think, the biggest problem that we've faced is that female-founded teams are not funded. And I think that's been a frustrating journey, I think, for anybody, certainly in the current market, because you're always going to compare, right?
Yeah, of course.
And that comparison kills you, because you look at male-founded teams with terrible ideas for unneeded so-called problems that they're solving, who get the quantum of check that they're given for quote unquote an idea on the back of an envelope, as opposed to 15 years of hard-earned research, commitment, dedication, understanding, where everything has absolutely been positioned, all of the financials worked out, all of the, marketing.
Understood.
And you say, despite coming with this actually pre-delivered product, we're ready to go with this, we just need to scale. You just can't get past the gambit, and it's very difficult to not become a little bit bitter about that.
Understood. Absolutely.
And to be questioned on the market when it's such a sizable market. And I do think there's a huge difference when you speak to male versus female investors. Shouldn't be, but there is. Like when you sat down, you said, "I get it. This is wholeheartedly, I get it." When we speak to female investors, they are, they instantly say, "Oh my God, this is needed," or "If I'd had this, my life would have been so different," or "When can I get this?" or "I've used it, my friends have used it, thank you." And yet we're still receiving these barriers, whereby actually the check writers unfortunately tend to have an X and a Y chromosome, which doesn't help us, because
and it's important
they
to
don't
air
get
this, isn't it? It's really important to make that visible. And again, for people watching and listening to this now, how to break through those barriers, because you're right. It's I do a lot of mentoring and things like that, and the amount of times you hear these stories, I've experienced something similar myself with different startups that I've been involved in and things, and it puts people. It happens too many times. People don't come back.
It does.
And also the skills piece around this as well. Another barrier that I've seen is maybe you don't have all the different pieces, but
Nobody
there are
does.
supports out there. Exactly. And that's one of the other big differences, isn't it? All the research kind of shows that if you're a man, typically you'll go for that next opportunity without having, say, 100% of what's in the job description or something like that. If you're female, it tends to be a much lower. You feel like you need to literally tick everything in a box rather than grow into it, and it's a mindset type of approach. So that's another interesting area to look at too. But what I'm also wanted to showcase, and we'll put some links in the video about this as well, is there's some programs that are all about supporting female founders. But if you're watching and listening, I think reach out to both of us. I think we're fair to say that would be very welcome to do that. Again, to give advice of what we experienced, but also we'll share some links about funding opportunities, and also a role model series as well, because there's lots of different aspects to this about different types of barriers. It can be skills, it can be skills confidence, it can be financials we're talking about here, but also things like funding applications. Again, it can be very, very high barrier to get through that, and what they're asking for, the sort of data that you're working with and have been through this process, I think can be especially valuable. Some people might only have qualitative, and that can be a massive barrier as well to get through that funding point. So we'll definitely follow up on this, because there's more than one video, I think, on this particular subject area. So we'll come back to it definitely. And kind of bringing this particular area to a close. I know, and I mentioned when we first sat down, I have a program that's called 365. And that's about visibility of role models in tech, literally from the most diverse background possible. And I do a particular focus on neurodiversity too, because again, I think it's underexplored. I would love it if we could just do a little piece kind of sharing something that's helped you. We talked about some of the challenges. What moments have made a difference and have helped you push through, aside from that self-belief, because I think you've really brought to the fore. That's fantastic. But anything else you've experienced, it could be valuable for someone. It could be at school at the moment, thinking about what they want to do and like not being put off to go for things. Or it could be an older adult, for example, maybe looking to reskill or upskill at the moment. Because again, a lot of people are thinking in that situation. But maybe something on that lines that we can share that might help them or someone they know.
I recently saw somebody give a talk, and they said that when they started their company, they had two girls at home, and they said it was just them. They were a solo parent, and they said failure was not an option. And it resonated so much with me, because when I started Hertility, I was 3 months pregnant. And so failure was not an option. This was something that I was going to drive forward no matter what. And when people often, the start with why theory and reminding yourself of why, I don't need to remind myself why, because every single day we see stories of women who are suffering, who need help, who've gone through years of misdiagnosis, who are simply not getting the help they need. And to me, that is the biggest inspiration, are the people for whom we built this for, the individual lives for whom it affects. So often, you'll hear the numbers to say, we reached target, or how many people have done the health assessment. And I always remember saying, those aren't health assessments. Those are people. Those are people for whom they have searched for answers, and we have been their answer. We have been the care that they couldn't get anywhere else. And I think that, to me, through all of the hard times, has really kept me going, is the fact that I know that there is somebody that this will benefit every single day.
Exactly. I mean, again, I talk a lot and do a lot of work around kind of tech as a force for good, for a better way of putting it. And what you're doing there really is moments with meaning, and reinforcing the fact this is an individual, this is a person, this is a couple, this is a family, or an individual, whichever form that takes. But this is life-changing. This is something that can, it's just a beautiful thing, isn't it? To support someone in that journey and to help them, and also to where people get stuck and don't know the reasons for certain things, that limbo land in any walk of life, but let alone personal family situations and things, when you don't know and you haven't got that support, it can be the hardest thing in the world. So even if you can't necessarily get to maybe the answer you really want, at least you can understand why and get support through that process too.
Absolutely.
So whichever area you are in this
Absolutely.
particular spectrum, it can make that difference. And it's moving me just talking about this, honestly, Helen, it really is. So thank you, firstly, for persevering, to pushing through and to keep going, through those difficult moments. Thank you for all you're doing for women's health, but also for health more broadly, and especially for democratizing access to those sort of opportunities too, because that's what I believe in so strongly. It's given me goosebumps talking to you, because it really is purposeful tech. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining me.
That's
and
great.
Thank you all, and follow up with questions as well, because I know we'll both be willing to do that and help you on your journey too. So this is Sally Eaves, this is Helen O'Neill, and we're Tomorrow's Tech Today live at the AWS Summit London. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Tomorrow's Tech Today. If you enjoy what we're doing, please subscribe to us and leave a review. It really means a lot. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram and see more behind the scenes video footage on YouTube. Thanks for listening.